Hi, and welcome to Pam Branch Designs. I design decoupage papers, among other things, and I have created some new papers that are seamless repeating patterns. So when you put the papers next to each other or one on top of the other in terms of positioning, the pattern continues from one paper to the next. So you can cover an area of your project and have that same pattern throughout, and you shouldn't be able to tell too much that it is more than one paper. I'm not so sure if it's the perfect way to decoupage, but I'm going to try it out today. And you can tell me what you think. I'm going to be using that blue floral paper to decoupage this tissue box. I bought it at a thrift store, and it has the little words "achoo" on the tissue box. I don't really want that on there, even though it's cute and everything. At first I tried to put a little Mod Podge on it, thinking that would like fill in the words. It didn't. So I used some spackling paste from my stash, and then I used a makeup applicator to smooth that spackling paste across the letters to fill it in. That way, when I apply my paper, those words should not show through. Originally, the words were black, but then I put a coat of chalk paint on it even before I started. So now I just have to wait for the spackling paste to dry. Now that it's dry, I'm giving it a good sanding to make it smooth, and then I can start my decoupage project. Since I let this sit on a shelf after that first coat of Mod Podge, it got a little scuffed up. I'm not Mod Podge, I mean the white chalk paint. So I'm just putting another coat of chalk paint over the whole thing. And then once that dries, then I will start the decoupage. Now, I tend to print my designs on rice paper, but I thought a lighter tissue paper would be better for the seamless repeating pattern paper. So I was testing out different papers, and I like this one, but it's a little glossy. So I didn't go with this one, but I do like how transparent it is. You can leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this paper. And I think I'll most likely be doing some other projects with the heavier tissue paper. It's not as glossy, it's more matte, which I like. So right now I'm just playing around with the positioning of the paper. I want to make sure that everything lines up correctly, and I also want to make sure that I have the best placement for the tissue itself, because I could start the tissue at the very bottom of the tissue box holder and then just add some tissue at the top to fill in that gap, like this. But I like the idea of just having like a band of the design around the tissue box holder as opposed to covering up the entire thing. And because this is a lighter tissue paper, I'm using a napkin glue. It's more lightweight, and I find that it works better with this paper. Mod Podge works nicer with like a heavier paper, just in my opinion, like rice paper. So I'm just putting some glue down first and then applying my tissue over the glue. And I find that this particular tissue worked well when it came to like being able to lift it up and reposition it. I mean, you can't do it over and over again, but it was somewhat forgiving. And now I'm just using some plastic that I had in my stash, probably left over from being wrapped on something that I bought. But that helps to just smooth everything down as opposed to using my fingers, which I usually end up doing anyway. So I'm just using a little bit of glue to just glue down that edge, and then just pressing it down. I'm trying to do my best to alleviate having like too many wrinkles or bubbles. So that's where that smoothing comes into play. So I'm just smoothing out the paper with my plastic. And then I applied another piece of paper. And now I'm going to add another piece of paper to the edge of that, and then you'll be able to see how it's a seamless repeating pattern. At least that's the intention. The key is when this paper arrives, it is going to have a bit of a border around it, so you just have to cut it out and just cut the white part of the paper away and just not leave any white on the edge of the paper because you don't want that seam to show. So I'm just applying some glue, and then I'll apply the next paper, and then I'll butt the two together, the two ends, so that you can see what I mean by being a seamless repeating pattern. I want to line up these edges just right so that they attach, so it looks like it's just a continuation of the design. And again, I like this paper because it is forgiving in terms of being able to lift it up and put it back down. If you're using like a napkin, chances are you're not going to be able to do that. Napkins are pretty delicate and they rip pretty easily. And because this pattern is pretty busy, which is part of the reason I made it kind of busy, it's easier to line it up, and it's also easier to hide any mistakes or flaws in the application process. Now I'm just continuing the same process of smoothing down the paper over the glue that I've already applied to the tissue box. I thought about using the heat method where you put the glue down first and then you use heat to apply it, but because this isn't a project that's flat, and also because the glue doesn't need to be all over the entire project, just in the center here, I just felt like I would rather just use the glue in its wet form and then apply the paper, especially since I can lift the paper up and put it back down just to make sure that the position is correct. Now this paper, as well as other seamless repeating pattern papers, are available on PamBranchDesigns.com. I'm trying to do my best to make sure that the paper continues to be parallel. I feel like it's sort of going to the right a little bit there, but I'm just now noticing it as I'm watching the video to edit it, but I think it's going to turn out fine. So this is what I mean about cutting away at the white paper that's around the border. So when you receive the paper, you want to cut it out and make sure that you cut away as much of that white as possible. That way, when you're applying your paper to your project, there won't be like a little white strip where your two edges are supposed to meet. In order to really get that seamless pattern effect, you want to make sure that there's nothing interrupting that seam. Now this part is a little challenging now that these two edges are going to meet, because they're not necessarily going to line up because of the measurements of the tissue box, and it's not like they're meeting end to end. But again, because this pattern is pretty busy, I think it's going to work out because it's also on the corner where the pieces meet, and I just don't think it'll be that obvious. And what I'm doing is just using my nail to just create a bit of a fold in the paper so that when I cut it away, I'll have a guide as far as how much I need to cut away so that those two edges meet. It's not perfect, but I think it looks really nice. Alright, so I think that turned out great. I think it looks really pretty and I love the blue. And so I'm also now going to seal it. I should probably wait until it's dry before putting the sealer on, but I'm a little impatient sometimes, so I'm just going to go ahead and seal the outside of the project, and then we're going to work on the top. Now I decided that because I have these sample size papers and I had them because I printed out the larger paper, I would just use the smaller papers on the top just to see how that would work out. If there's ever a paper on my website that you want to buy and the sample size, which is 2 1/4, is not available, or if there's some other size that you need that's not there, then you can certainly email me and I can see if I can print that out. So this is a smaller version of the same paper, and I'm just going to use this on the top just to give it a bit of a variety. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the glue down and then put the paper down and do my best to match up the seams. It probably would have been easier to use one of the larger papers, but I thought it would just be sort of an interesting test to see how it works out when you use the smaller version of the paper. So this is where things got a little tedious, just making sure everything lined up so that it would look like a continuous pattern. I think because the areas started to get so small and the shapes of the empty space were irregular, it made it a little challenging. Now there are some projects where I just use a bit of sandpaper or an emery board to just saw away at the edges so that the excess paper will come off. But because I really didn't want to like rough up the paper or the edges of the tissue box, I decided to just cut the paper away. Now I'm just going to trim away at the hole in the tissue box, and again I'm just going to cut it, and then I'm just going to fold the paper over into the inside of the box so that that ridge, the white ridge, won't be showing. Well, I'm sealing up the top of the tissue box, and I like the way this turned out. I think seamless repeating patterns in decoupage paper is actually a good idea. It is tedious to line up the pattern, but I think even if I did a larger size paper, I think it could work well even on like furniture or larger projects. If you want a pattern, it doesn't have to be as busy, but I really like it. The little dish to the right was made using the same paper. It's air dry clay, and I have another video coming out where I do some air dry clay projects, and that is one of the projects. So subscribe. Thanks for watching.